let's jump into some of the news of the day. I'd like to start actually with Brian Tyler Cohen and Glenn Kirshner talking about a big win that the DOJ. There we go. A big win that the DOJ just had in regards to Trump's buffoonery. Here we go.
So, Glenn, the Justice Department just secured a big win in front of a federal judge for the first time, arguing that it has evidence that Trump may have committed a crime in the classified documents case. Can you talk about what happened?
Yeah, this is really kind of a blockbuster development and one that is really bad for Donald Trump. Chief Judge Beryl Howell, who has supervisory authority over all grand jury matters in Washington, D.C. So that includes Jack Smith's grand jury investigation of the insurrection and Jack Smith's investigation of the documents crimes at Mar-a-Lago. One of Donald Trump's attorneys, Evan Corcoran, a former federal prosecutor with whom I used to work, I actually had a case in common with Evan many years ago. Jack Smith tried to put him before the grand jury, which in and of itself is really unusual. Generally, prosecutors don't subpoena the attorney who represents the target of the grand jury's investigation, because that attorney obviously and ordinarily would have an attorney-client privilege, so he or she could decline to testify. But Jack Smith said, you know what? We have reason to believe that Donald Trump used his lawyer, Evan Corcoran, in furtherance of committing crimes. And if the prosecution can prove that to the judge's satisfaction, well, then the attorney-client privilege evaporates. The attorney can't invoke it. And that is precisely what has happened. Chief Judge Beryl Howell concluded there was enough evidence that Donald Trump misled, deceived, lied to his lawyer, Evan Corcoran, and that is precisely what Chief Judge Beryl Howell found, that Donald Trump misled his lawyer, and that was in furtherance of obstructing justice. We'll circle back to that in a minute.
Do you notice the pattern here? Right? The Donald Trump sees lawyers as henchmen. I mean, he sees everybody that works for him as henchmen, but he sees lawyers as people who are qualified to do the dirty work. And unfortunately, I mean, he's been correct so far. Who was that attorney? Died in 1986. Worked for his father. It's killing me. Anyway, that was the guy he grew up with as his idea of what a lawyer does. And he treats all of his lawyers like that. He has that expectation out of them. My point being, if you want to track Trump criminality, you only have to go from lawyer to lawyer to lawyer to lawyer. Just watch what his lawyers do, and you will know who the next person, just watch who his lawyers are, and you will know who the next person in the DOJ crosshairs will be. Because if you agree to be Donald Trump's attorney, you are apparently also agreeing to commit crimes. Or at least you're going into it with the knowledge, unless you are blind, if you're in the legal profession, that he's going to ask you to do shady things. There's a reason there's a joke going around that MAGA stands for Make Attorneys Get Attorneys. This is very much a modus operandi of Donald Trump.
So now it looks like Evan Corcoran is going to be forced to go into the grand jury and do what?
Another one.
Testify about and against, incriminate Donald Trump, his own client, soon to be former client. And let me just say this. There's some really interesting parallels that have developed, that have emerged. Because up in New York, in DA Alvin Bragg's prosecution of the Stormy Daniels hush money payments, you have what? One of Donald Trump's former lawyers, Michael Cohen, testifying against him in the grand jury, incriminating him. Now down in D.C., what do we have? One of Donald Trump's lawyers about to testify in the grand jury against him and incriminate him. That's where the similarities, though, between these two circumstances end.
Not
Because
hold on.
Mike,
Not. I mean, there is the broad. There's the broader similarity, which is putting attorneys in a position where they have to commit crimes in addition to defending them. That really is Trump's go-to move. And it's fascinating to watch. I have no idea how he is able to get anyone to agree to represent him. I honestly don't. Because I would have understood, even up to a couple years ago, being willing to represent this guy, if only for the fame. But it's pure infamy now. It's pure infamy. There is no way to represent Donald Trump without getting fired by Donald Trump and not wind up yourself eventually having to answer to justice. It's crazy.
Michael Cohen, I think we all recognize, is kind of damaged goods as a witness. Now, not irretrievably so. Michael Cohen was a co-conspirator with Donald Trump. So, of course, he's damaged goods. He committed the crime with Donald Trump at Donald Trump's direction and for the benefit of Donald Trump. But he is something of a credibility challenge as a witness against Donald Trump. But now when we move back down to D.C., Donald Trump's lawyer, Evan Corcoran, a former federal prosecutor, was misled, was lied to by Donald Trump. And the result is, the judge said, it looks like Donald Trump obstructed justice by lying to his lawyer and getting his lawyer to lie to the government, lie to the federal agents, and say, no, my client tells me there are no more classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. And what did we learn? Well, when the FBI went in and searched Mar-a-Lago, pursuant to a judicially authorized search warrant, there were classified documents in Donald Trump's desk drawers. So the fact that his lawyer, Evan Corcoran, a former federal prosecutor, may now be in a position to testify against Donald Trump and incriminate him is really blockbuster. And
I'm sure they'll talk about it. Oh, thumbnail right there. I'm sure they'll talk about it. But let's just be clear. Corcoran had his underling sign for that. He did not sign for it. To me, that speaks of knowledge of guilt and understanding that something shady was going on because he didn't want to get his hands on it. And his underling very cleverly said, I have been told by my boss that there are no more documents, and so I'll sign to that. Smart gal. Shouldn't be working for Trump. She'd be a lot smarter if she wasn't working for Trump, but a smart gal. And I don't think that Corcoran is as unwitting as he will claim to be. But I understand the point Kirshner is making here. He's saying for a jury, this is less of a concern than Cohen would be.
There are at least two crimes that this gives rise to. One is obstructing justice because you acted contrary to the grand jury subpoena requiring you to give all of those classified documents back. And the other is the crime of lying to the federal government, what we call a 1001 crime, because it's found in the U.S. Code at 18 United States Code 1001, false statements to a government official. Coincidentally, 1001 is probably about the number of times Donald Trump lies to his lawyers every day.
Now, I was going to ask why we haven't seen Corcoran resign from Trump's team by now, but I recognize now that the Trump team is trying to appeal this. So what is the likelihood that they'll be successful in this appeal? And the appeal would be basically on Judge Howell's claim that the crime fraud exception applies in this case, and so Corcoran isn't protected by attorney-client privilege. What's the likelihood that the Trump team will be successful here? And also, what's the political makeup of that appeals bench?
I just want to pause for a moment and say this is an awesome time to be alive. Think about Glenn Kirshner, for example. I've seen that guy on MSNBC a baker's dozen times over the last couple of months. On CNN, I've seen multiple channels I have seen him on. And we get to see extended clips of him, a legal expert, breaking this stuff down every day if we want. Every day. I admit, I even go a little too hard, maybe, with the Brian Tyler Cohen and what have you. I just love that we exist in an era where this is feasible. You don't need an entire network and a whole building full of staff running things. You can have a guy and a camera. And that means legal experts like this are available. It's just cool, man. It's very cool.
Yeah, so it looks like Donald Trump's defense team will be appealing Judge Howell's ruling that Evan Corcoran must go in and testify about and against Donald Trump. That is now in front of 3 judges on the appellate court in D.C. All 3 of those judges, coincidentally, were appointed by Democrats, I believe 2 by Biden and 1 by Obama. You know, I usually hate to sort of throw that into the mix, but in this day and age, particularly when you have, Trump appointed judges, many of whom were rated not qualified to serve as federal judges by the American Bar Association, the times we live in involve us always asking who appointed this judge.
Just as a quick aside, is there a world in which,
Okay, well, there's the downside to the times we live in. Technology, great. Politics, ooh, boy, they're getting dangerous. Hopefully, though, the fever is about to break. We're on indictment watch, people. For the first time ever, as bad as it got, for the first time ever in America's history, a criminal president, of which we have had many before, a criminal president may be held accountable. Inshallah.
let's say Judge Howell's ruling is confirmed by this 3-judge panel in the appeals court. Is there a world in which the Trump team can appeal it further?
There is a world in which they can seek review in the Supreme Court. All bets are off because this is such uncharted territory. All bets are off with respect to whether the Supreme Court would accept review of this really interesting issue. But here's the thing, at its core, it's not that unusual an issue. Unfortunately, we frequently have times where the target of the grand jury investigation is using his or her lawyer to help the target commit crimes. And so we go about this exercise of trying to pierce the attorney-client privilege and have the lawyer testify against the client. But so the issue doesn't present any big constitutional question for the Supreme Court to take up. But of course, there is intense interest in this because it involves a former president. So, will some of Donald Trump's defenders on the Supreme Court or his, ideological buddies up there, will they decide to accept review and perhaps try to, throw a little help Donald Trump's way? I mean, I even hate to say that, but these are the times we're living in.
Yeah.
If I had to bet my $1, my betting limit, not a high roller, I would say that the Supreme Court is not likely to accept review of this case because they know exactly what's going on here on the legal front. And when a client enlists a lawyer, either wittingly or unwittingly in his crimes, well, I'm sorry, that lawyer has to testify.
Okay.
Encouraging.
Now, with that said, what can prosecutors expect to learn from Corcoran? If you were probing him, what would be the most valuable information that you'd seek from him?
So really interestingly, right now, it looks like there's a battle being fought over whether the prosecutors, Jack Smith's team, should be permitted to get its hands on notes, documents, and recordings. Lordy, it looks like there are more tapes that Evan Corcoran has in his possession. Now, because that's...
at some point, someone is going to release an audiobook, they just consist of recordings of Trump confessing to crimes or arranging crimes. As I say that, I realize I might release a podcast that's just those recordings with me offering commentary over them. Bizarre how often this guy is caught on tape, and yet is still not in prison. Good Lord, come on, DOJ.
Being reported out, we don't know about the substance of them yet. It sounds like these notes, these documents, these recordings are going to be relevant to what it is Donald Trump told Evan Corcoran before Evan Corcoran prepared a certification to the federal government saying, nope, Donald Trump has given over all the classified documents, which we now know to be false. So I think what is of the most interest is not only Evan Corcoran's testimony, but what the documents and the tapes say that might support Evan Corcoran's testimony. Because, you know, somebody testifying is important, but corroborating their testimony with notes, documents, and audio recordings is perhaps even more important.
And this all seems
really fascinating stuff. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. What can you do about it? This one's so easy, folks. You don't have to do anything. You already did it. The Department of Justice would not be pursuing any case at all against Donald Trump if public pressure hadn't been there. You did it already. By showing interest, by being vocal about your interest in justice being pursued, the Department of Justice is actually doing their job. It's amazing to see. It's wonderful to see, and you should be proud that that happened in your time. If you're alive on Earth at this moment, this is your time, and this is the first time in the country's history, in the history of the United States of America, that a president who broke the law is being held responsible for it. You should be proud. Watch this. Enjoy the suffering of a bad person. And rest a little bit easier knowing that justice is creeping in. Bit by bit, justice is creeping into the United States again. Love to see it.